Variables are just a special type of input within NodeScript with a few major differences. The first one being that they're handled at the workspace level. This means you can use the same variable across multiple graphs provided they're in the same workspace. The second one being that the value of a variable is encrypted at rest. This means that all of your sensitive information, like API keys or password, are stored securely in the NodeScript database. Variables are also never shared outside of their workspace. This means if you do publish a graph using a variable, other workspaces can use that graph, but they must provide their own data for the variables. This just keeps everything isolated and secure. Finally, variables are automatically filled if you were to expose your graph as an endpoint or schedule it. One quick security note to keep in mind before we start is that your environment values are securely stored within the NodeScript database. However, the editor requires the original unencrypted values to function properly. So any user with access to your workspace will technically have access to your secrets. So keep security in mind when you design your system and make sure you take some extra steps just to secure your secrets as needed to maintain a secure environment. So, with all that being said, I'm going to show you now how to add a variable to a workspace and then call it into a graph. You can see here we've added this very simple HTTP GET request to our canvas, and in the URL we have this Open Weather Map API call. If we run it now, we'll have a message saying invalid API key. So we're going to add our API key as a variable to the workspace and then call it to make this graph work. So we navigate to variables and we add new variable. We have to add the name. Now this has to be all caps. If you do the wrong naming conventions, the platform will tell you, please enter it in all caps. So we'll call ours API key. The value is where you put your information. In our case, it's going to be our custom API key that we have from Open Weather Map. We can just paste that into the value field. It's toggled to sensitive, which means it's hidden. You can untoggle that if you obviously want to read it yourself. There is a note here which will tell you that because we encrypt the variables at rest, that means you can't change it after it's been created. You can also add a description just for other team members, or maybe just to remind yourself what exactly this variable is. Alright, so going back over to our graph, we can just call that variable in now as we would any other node or input under the correct name, in our case API key, and we can see the value of it is hidden. We can click this I if we want to view the value ourselves. So checking their documentation, we can see that it takes as a query app ID, and this is where our API key needs to live. So to add that to our graph, we'll add an object. And one of the values of this object will be our API key. So we'll just rearrange slightly here and we'll use the plus symbol and we'll add in here app ID so it matches the documentation. We'll plug our key into that. Then how do we get our request to recognize this as the query? Easy here, we just click on more and then we can use query, and whatever we connect will be treated as the query for this request. Now, if we run the node again, the output will be a functioning API call, in this case giving us the weather for London. So you can see here we've added this variable and now it's just used as any other input. The major difference being that the value of our API key is hidden. It's not available publicly, and if I was to share this graph publicly, that would still be encrypted and not available for public use. So that's everything you need to know to get started with variables. And hopefully now you have a better understanding of how variables work in NodeScript so you can effectively utilize sensitive data across all of your workflows whilst maintaining a safe environment.